Hey everyone, thanks for being here on the video in the channel. I appreciate it more than you know. So, as you've been getting closer to retirement, has there been any nerves that have been formulating? And not just because a new chapter of life is about to start, but maybe because there's nerves on your ability to retire based off of external events. What do I mean? Well, you've been paying attention to the news more, politics, the economy, stock market. You've been paying attention to these things more because deep inside you feel, hey, if things go bad, if externally or economically things don't work out, then that might jeopardize my ability to retire on time, or at least have a dignified and independent retirement. Well, I'm here to tell you that shouldn't be the case. And oftentimes, people can get a lot of confidence and conviction through stress testing your financial plan. That's what we're going to do today. Now, before we do, comment, subscribe. I appreciate the support from that perspective. And we're just going to get straight into it. So we've been on this journey with Mike and Rachel, to say the least. We started when they were 10 years out. Now they're 3 years out. Okay, 3 years out from retirement. And me as an advisor, I notice when clients start to get somewhere between like 12 to 36 months out from retirement, I start to get questions that I've never gotten before in our relationship with said client. Questions like, hey, Tyler, am I good? Am I good? I've been paying attention to the market, and am I positioned okay? What if things freak out? Hey, I really don't know about what this politician did. I really am not optimistic, or I heard this opinion, right? I start to hear things that I never heard before. And usually I know right then and there, hey, I need to show them the stress test. I need to run simulations, show it to them, remind them that doesn't matter what happens externally, they're good. Let's look at that. So Mike and Rachel, this should look familiar. Mike and Rachel Ross, we ran stress tests for them. And a fancy word for stress tests in the financial industry is Monte Carlo simulations. Honestly, I don't know why they call it that. I'm not the biggest fan of fancy words, but that's what they call it. Just think Monte Carlo. Think, hey, I'm if someone's running a Monte Carlo simulation for me, they're just putting my plan through the ringer. Okay. And what that means is they're running 1,000 different trials and seeing what percent of the time does my plan come out ahead. Meaning some of these trials are like, hey, what if World War III happens? What if inflation goes through the roof? The market tanks. My spouse were to pass away prematurely. I get disabled. All of these situations, trials, God forbid. What percentage of the time do we come out ahead? For Mike and Rachel, it's 82% of the time. Okay, which honestly is pretty good. Looking at some of these scores, 0 to 69, considered low from a Monte Carlo point of view. And that makes sense, right? We're kind of groomed from childhood to think of anything below 70 as failure. Now, medium, if you're between 70 to 81, honestly, if you're within this range, you're doing pretty good. Now, anything above 82 is considered excellent. Mike and Rachel should not put on their vision board or their journaling tonight the goal of trying to hit 100. Okay, that should not be a financial priority for them. Honestly, many people are not 100 from a Monte Carlo perspective. If they are, if a client, we run the simulation, they're at 100, then we might be telling them, hey, it's time to adjust your goals. Maybe we increase your retirement spend or your giving because you don't necessarily need to be 100. Okay. Now, what's fun is we see the 82% success, but we can isolate the 18%. We can say, hey, what are the specific scenarios that's causing this not to be 100? And can I insulate myself from those scenarios or insure against those risks? Oftentimes the answer is yes. And give me a couple minutes because this is going to be pretty cool. We're going to come full circle here. So we can run specific what ifs, okay? And we could say, hey, like, what if inflation rises? What if we assumed within this plan for Mike and Rachel it was 3% because that's what it's been the past century? Well, 2.97. But what if inflation's higher, right? What if they get unlucky and have retirement where they experience atypical inflation rates? It's higher than normal. Is their plan good? They went from an 82 to a 75. Honestly, that's not really much of a hit at all. Why is that? Well, you should remember from our year 6 video this picture right here. This shows the return of stocks, bonds, and cash after taxes and inflation. So the first step down, like if we're looking at stocks, for instance, from 10.1 to 7, the first step down is inflation. The second step down is taxes. And you can see cash after inflation and taxes is negative. You actually experience negative returns by holding cash on your balance sheet. Bonds is not too much better. Okay, so if Mike and Rachel had a ton of their money positioned in bonds and cash because they're thinking, hey, I'm nervous about the market, the stock market, I'm getting closer to retirement, let me just put everything on the sidelines, then that is actually going to do more harm than good to their simulations, their stress testing. Okay, tying it full circle. So those of you who are sitting on like, more than you need in cash because you're nervous, think again. You might want to sit down with an advisor and get that money working for you in a more meaningful way. Because there's one thing that has proven time and time again to outpace inflation and insulate you from inflation risks. And that is far left. Equities, stock market is time and time again the thing that outpaces inflation. Okay, so inflation, not a huge risk for them because they don't have excess amounts in cash bonds. Now let's look at, let's look at a couple of these. What if a long-term care event happens to Rachel? Is she good? The plan says yes. The score went from 82 to 82, meaning if a long-term care event happens to Rachel, there is no change or no risk in the plan. Why? Because Mike and Rachel are self-insured. They have enough assets to get them through a long-term care event. So that tells us they don't need long-term care insurance. Okay, let's look at one more. Let's say, hey, what if, let's look at this one. What if Mike gets disabled? Is he good? Well, it's 82 of 82. Why is that? Well, it's 82 of 82 because if you remember in our previous video in the series, I think it's year 8, when we did a audit of their cash flow, there was this recommendation in bullet point number 3, risk management, to cover the disability gap for Mike. Meaning, hey, get long-term care disability insurance to cover the gap. If God forbid something were to happen and you're disabled and you're not earning your income at your job to the quantity that you were doing before, you need to cover that risk. Why does Mike need to cover that risk? Or why did we recommend Mike to cover that risk? Check this out. So if we back out the disability insurance that Mike had gotten through some of our recommendations, if we back this out, look what happens to the Monte Carlo simulation. It was at 82 before. It goes down to a 8% probability of success. So without that disability insurance in place, it goes from 82 all the way down to 8. So that's a huge risk for Mike. Why is that? Thinking about that intuitively, it's because Mike and Rachel are dependent on Mike's income. Mike's the breadwinner. They're depending on Mike's income the next few years before retirement because their income's not only paying for their living expenses right now, but it's also the fuel that's saving more money into their retirement accounts. And if Mike's income gets cut in half because he's disabled and not able to earn his income at the rate that he was doing it before, the plan does not like that. So we told them to insure against that risk. And we can run a bunch of different what ifs. In fact, we do. And we make sure to insure against the biggest of risks for Mike and Rachel and clients, right? And once that's done, once some of those risks are covered and people see that they're insulated against the worst of the worst trials, that oftentimes can give people confidence and conviction that, hey, it doesn't matter what happens externally. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who is in office next. It doesn't matter what happens in the stock market. It doesn't matter what happens economically. I'm good. I'm retiring on time. It's a dignified and independent retirement is what I'm headed towards. That's how you should feel. So hopefully this is helpful. Run the simulations with your advisor. They have some great tech to do it. If we can be helpful, reach out, comment down below. And until next time, Mike and Rachel, next video, they're 2 years out. They got a big healthcare decision to make then. Bye now.